Greetings, fellow Kerbonauts! Nerdy Spaceman here, in for yet another installment of A Beginner's Guide to Kerbal Space Program. And in this episode, we're gonna do a moon flyby. So in the previous episode, we built the Onyx, which is gonna be our super awesome aircraft for getting, or spacecraft for getting all the way up to the moon. We're gonna do a moon flyby in this episode. First things first, I'm gonna show you this little button here, and it's gonna be warp to next morning. And it's a great little button. It time warps us so that we're in the morning, so we can see everything during the launch and everything's fine and dandy. I'm gonna go ahead and select the Onyx, make sure we got Bob in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and launch. Now the thing to know about this rocket is since it has a solid fuel booster and we've got rudders and everything's all perfect and set up, I'm just gonna go ahead and launch it, and I'm gonna start talking that you can turn the rocket right away. And that's extremely important because going up is okay, right? That's fine. But you want to go out. You want to go lateral right away. That's like the best thing you want to do. So what I do is I generally get to about 100 meters per second, and then I start my gravity turn. That's what it's called, the turn to the east. So there it is. I'm gonna start my gravity turn. I pitch over so that I'm like hugging the right side of the prograde marker, and when I pitch it until I get to about 70, 75-ish. That's usually what I do, so I'm just like gently nudging it over, just gently, trying to keep my aircraft from spinning all over the place, and there it is, and hit Prograde. Now, I'm going to do adjustments. Now I'm pointing 96 degrees, I want to be pointing straight 90 degrees to the east, so I'm going to go ahead and point my rocket down, so I can drag that Prograde marker towards the horizon there, and there we go, and 91's good. So again, the Prograde is automatically pushing me down, and when I hit to 15,000 meters, 15,000 meters, I want to be going right above the 45 degree line, and that looks like that's what's happening. It's right above the 45. That's perfect. Heading is 91 degrees. That's good. We don't want it to be farther than that. It's a good degree. And we're getting a little bit of re-entry effects, but the atmosphere is about to run out, so that's quite alright. We're going to be just fine. I don't think the heating is going to be too bad on our rocket. I'm going to open up the map view, and here we are. We're almost at the altitude that we need to be in, and we're about to be out of the liquid fuel stage, which is great on the side boosters here, because when we run out, we'll have a full rocket filled with fuel in it. I'm going to go ahead and jettison these, and switch off my engine, and 89, there it is. So we just got enough. These are just enough to get us, to push us, and then go up into space. And here we are. We're going to just cruise our way all the way up there. Now, while we're cruising all the way up there, I'm going to go ahead and add a little prograde marker here, because I know I'm supposed to add lateral, and that means prograde right at the horizon. So the horizon is at the apoapsis when you're launching. I'm going to go ahead and adjust it a little bit and keep going. Now, to make a perfectly circular orbit, you'll see that these are going to flip, meaning the lowest point is going to trade places with the highest point, and vice versa. So that means that they're right at that point when they start trading places. They're going to be roughly equal to each other. So that's a good indicator of how to do that. Gives us a little marker here. We've got 1200 meters per second delta V, and I'm going to go ahead and point to the maneuver node. And you'll notice that it's pretty tough to turn us. That's because the only reaction force we have in this rocket is from this crew pod. We've got a full rocket that's pretty much topped off with fuel, and it's pretty heavy to turn this thing. But it's quite alright. It's going to jiggle a little bit. Once we have the engine going with the gimbal, it keeps us nice and stable. So we get a burn time of 1 minute and 18 seconds. That's about 39 seconds on each side, if you split the difference. So T minus 39 seconds, I'm going to hit max throttle and try to see if we can deplete the timer at a perfect time. So here we are, 41, 40, 39, max throttle. Make sure we're pointing at the maneuver node. And here we are. We're on our way to get into orbit with a rocket filled with fuel. By the time we get into orbit, I'm expecting some of this rocket to still be left behind, which is quite alright. It's not bad. I don't need anything exuberant because this little fuel rocket here, this little fuel tank here with a little fuel efficient engine, that's the key part. Now if you remember from the previous videos, we went to orbit for the first time. This stage down here was out of fuel before we got to space. We just used this to circularize and go up and down and stuff. So this is going to be faring just fine. And this rocket we're going to use to push us into orbit and then give us the initial jump to start flying to the moon. Where is the moon? Oh, there's the moon. Hello. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and make sure we're staying strong. Here we got a little bit of heating issues. This is this is interesting. It's the engine produces heat on the inside of the rocket, and then the inside of the rocket transfers that heat to the surface of the rocket, and then it transfers it to any other parts in that. And these fins here are taking up most of the heat, and they generally can't handle that much, but they're quite alright. Anyways, here we are. Oh, hitting the thrust, and there we go. There we go. That's close enough. And what do we got here? We've got 96, 82. I guess that's circular enough. We'll go with it. So, how do you get to the moon? How do you do a moon flyby? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to first left click and select the moon as our target. Set it as our target. And we're going to get this little thing is going to turn green, and we're going to get these two little ascending and descending nodes. For now, so long as you're about 1 or less degrees, you're fine. You can ignore them. We'll talk about that when we get to the min-mass orbit. It has to do with the offset of the orbit. So if you can zoom out here, and you can see when you line these up flat, you'll see there's a point at which they intersect. There it is. So flat orbit. So it's just a line, and here's another line. You can see that they're off at an angle. You see that? That's what these ascending and descending nodes are talking about. They're talking about that angle, the angle at which you're different from the equator or from the orbit that you're currently in. Now, the cool thing to know about that is that the moon is actually in a perfectly equatorial orbit. It makes it easy to get to when you're starting off first. But that's why I said in the very beginning to make sure your heading is at as close to 90 degrees as you can make it, because that's what this is. 90 degrees is perfectly equatorial, and that's what the moon is. So anyways, enough yapping about that. Let's go to the moon. So as before, I talked about adding prograde increases your height at the opposite end of the planet. So when we add a maneuver node and we keep adding speed, it's going to give us this wonky little orbit. And if we keep going, it's going to get more and more distorted. Eventually, it's going to intercept with the moon's orbit, and you're going to get these two little markers. These are the closest approach markers, and you want these to be on top of each other. So you can mess that around by choosing, once you've set your speed roughly, you can change those around by messing with when you burn your engine. And when you drag it out, you'll see these are going to get closer and closer. If they get close enough, you're going to get an intercept, and this is what this is. You're now interacting with the moon's gravity, and it's changing your own orbit. So that's what a gravity. That's what gravity does when you're in space. And there's different types of interceptions. So when you intercept from behind the moon like this, you'll actually be adding energy, and if you keep going, you'll actually be taking away energy. And these are called different types of intercepts. For us, we can just I like to make sure that the apoapsis happens first. So in this orange line, you can see back here before they intercept, you can see the apoapsis. When you start interacting, you interact with the moon before you hit your apoapsis. I prefer to wait until you actually hit your apoapsis, there it is again, and then interact with the moon. It's more likely that you'll do a free return orbit. Free return is essentially, here it is, you go to the moon, you start falling, and when you interact with the moon, it slows you down even more so that you actually come back to the planet. So with one burn, you go all the way out to the moon and back into the planet. And that's what the Apollo missions did. The first Apollo missions, the ones before they landed, they did the free returns. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit less. And all I'm interested in is getting that periapsis as close to the surface as possible. The second periapsis. Now what's going on here is you've got the orange line, and then you get this little circle, and once that little circle happens, it's telling you that you're going to interact with the moon. So you can see here, this little orange dot that's going to appear, that's where the moon will be when you enter its gravitational field. So it'll be over there. By the time you get to the periapsis of the moon's orbit, meaning the lowest point to the moon, it'll be at this purple circle here. That's where the moon will be then. By the time you leave, it'll be down there. So you can imagine, we're going to fly up here, and it's going to zoom by us at the same time that we're up here. We're going to swing around it a couple times, or once. It looks like we're going to do a little loop-de-loop around the moon. And then we're going to fly off again into our own different orbit, because the moon's going to push us around a bit with its gravity. And then by the time we leave, the moon will be off in its merry way. We're not going to affect the moon as much as it affects us, because of the major difference in mass. Anyway, so that's how you do that. Get close. It doesn't have to be perfect, because once you have that orbit, we can then tweak it ourselves by, doing prograde, retrograde, stuff like that. But anyways, I have my maneuver node set. I'm ready to go. It's a burn of 1 minute and 2 seconds. So at T-minus 31 seconds, we're going to start doing our burn. I'm going to go ahead and click past the maneuver node and select warp to next maneuver, and it's going to stop me at T-minus 1 minute from the burn time. And I'm going to use that opportunity to click on my maneuver node so I can point myself towards where I'm supposed to burn. Now, since I start moving this fast, I'm going to swing by it. You see that? I'm going to swing past it. But once I swing past it, or whenever I want to, I can actually time warp. And when I time warp, it's actually going to stop all rotational energy. It makes the physics of the game a lot easier. So you'll see here, it's going to swing by again. I'm going to time warp for a second and let go, and it's going to swing. It's going to stop moving. T-minus 31, hit the throttle, and I'm off. So now, I'm looking at this, and I don't think I'm going to have enough fuel. So I should have started probably burning it a little bit sooner. But that's going to be okay. I think we should be fine. Plus, our node, just for some reason, the timer went down. So we might be a little shy, but I think we'll be just fine. This is going to run out. And then we're going to stage, and goodbye stage. And we're going to use this ladder stage to get to the moon flyby. I'm going to go ahead and do this, and you'll see as our orbit gets there. And I'm going to kill the engine prematurely the moment I get in. There it is. I got an event. So I'm a little bit, I guess I overshot it. So that's going to be quite alright. I have the event. And here is there's no periapsis. It's gone. That's because I'm actually going to be hitting the surface of the moon. We don't want that. So I'm going to turn retrograde because we're now going in that direction. I'm going to point us a little bit in the opposite direction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to slow us down a bit because we're moving a bit fast. So I'm going to try just a little nudge until the periapsis appears. And there it is. Periapsis. 45. That's going to be good enough for us. I can then do, let's do more. So here it is. With just that little nudge, we overshot by that much the moment it appeared. So what we can do is we can go to the engine, right click on it, and reduce its thrust, its maximum thrust. So we have a thrust limiter of, let's say, 10. What this means is that even if we max our throttle, we're only going to be moving at 10% thrust. So if we give a nudge here, a little nudge here of 10%, so we're nudging 10%, so it's maybe like 1% or half a percent. We're going to, again, a little nudge, and you're going to get to about between, 10 to 15,000 meters. Let's do, there it is, 13. That's perfect. Perfect. It's going to throw us into this orbit after we leave, but for now, that's all we want. So I'm going to go ahead and start time warping. Now, while I'm time warping, just a little time warp so I get a little time to talk. What I'm doing now is imagine throwing a baseball so hard that it goes around the Earth. That's orbit, right? But if you throw a baseball just straight up, it goes up, 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 and then eventually it sort of looks like it stops moving for a second, and it starts to fall down. The same happens in space when you're already in orbit. So if you throw yourself away from an object's gravity, when you start coming back down, you're going to speed up. So meaning when you're flying away, you're going to slow down. And here you are. You can see it here in the orbit speed. We added a whole bunch of speed here. And as we get farther and farther from the planet, we're slowing down because we're moving away from the planet. So our energy is in the opposite direction of the gravitational pull. So gravity is going to be constantly siphoning away our energy. Now that's not bad because by the time we get up here, we'll be so far from the planet that, that's going to be our slower speed. So mathematically, I think it's Copernicus's law, I think, has stated this, that at the periapsis, the closest point to the orbit, you're moving the fastest. At the apoapsis, at the farthest point, you're moving the slowest. So if we're moving fast here, we're going to be moving really slow here because it's so far away. If we have a circular orbit, our apoapsis and periapsis, they are almost the same height. So the difference between the two is going to be very little. Now, the reason this is important is because look how far away the moon is. But if we're moving fast here, and we're slowing, and we eventually get up here and we're barely moving, when we have our first intercept, look how far away the moon is. It's all the way out there. Look how far away that is. By the time we actually get to the moon, it's traveled all of this distance because we're barely moving relative to the planet. The moon is moving pretty quickly relative to us. So that's all about relativity. So anyways, let's see how slow we actually get. I'm going to start time warping, and you can watch as we get closer to the moon. It looks like we're way too far ahead of it, but we're slowing down. Look at that. We're slowing down, and look, the moon's moving at 542, and we're already way slower than the moon. So the moon is already now catching up to us. And we're still slowing. We stop slowing when we hit the apoapsis, the slowest point in our orbit. That's why I like to intercept right after I hit my apoapsis, because it gives us the least amount of energy. The moon is most effective against us. And here it is. We hit our apoapsis, and there it is. Now we're actually starting to gain speed. There it is, 1.779, 177, and there it is. It keeps going up at this point because we're falling. But before we fall into this, start falling back closer to the planet, Kerbin, the moon is going to get so close to us that we're going to interact with it. when we interact with it, our gyroscope's going to flip. You'll see here, right when we interact with that point, that the nav ball is going to flip and our orbit's going to rearrange, because there it is. Nav ball flips, orbit rearranges. Everything now is relative to the moon, because that's the nearest gravitational source. So since that's where the moon's here, I say let's do some science. That's why we're here, right? Log the space high over the moon. Good. Then we can log the. Oh wait, we already have space high over the moon for the thermometer. Mystery goo. Crew report. Materials bay. Keep all those. And we can do an EVA. And do an EVA report. And it's all going to be space high over the moon. I'm going to go ahead and inch my way down here. I'm going to collect that data. Oh, got to restore it. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and take that data. Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, collect that data. And I've gone a little hasty with my ladder climbing. So that's quite alright. I'm going to go ahead and inch my way up here. Carefully. Grab. Oh, it launched me off again. Dang it. Come here. Come here. And this happens. Sometimes you're going to happen. Now, it's a lot easier to have your rocket pointing in the right direction, because right now it's like straight up, and it's not really the most ideal. Oh, come on. Come on now. Behave. Let's see here. And I'm using the left mouse to turn myself. Oh, come on. Alright, okay, this is what we're going to do. We are going to orient ourselves directly beneath it, and then turn off all relative energy, and then we're going to start adding upward speed, and then left mouse this way, and grab. Oh, thank goodness. Okay, that was unfortunate. I'm going to restore that goo, take that data, and board, and now we have 5 experiments stored in here. Enough flying around and messing with that. So, let's go to the moon. Let's get closer to the moon so we can do the space near the moon stuff. So I'm time warping, and here's the moon. It's cool, it's awesome, and we're gonna totally get some science from it. And we're gonna fly closer to the moon. Here we are. And when we get to, what was it, 13,000 or something like that? Or you can actually see when the altitude flips from going down to going up, you've hit that point. So here it is, and there it is. We're pulling away from the moon. This time I'm gonna point myself this way, so in case I do let go, it'll be alright. Do an EVA report. Go ahead and observe the materials bay. Thank you. Mystery goo. Thank you. EVA report. Thank you. Collect it. Restore it. Come on. Come on. Collect it. Oh, come on. Restore it. Log temperature. Keep it. Take it. And okay, we don't have a crew in there. I'm gonna board. I'm gonna do a crew report. Keep that, and then I'm gonna EVA, take it, and board. Okay, now when we're near, if you remember from before, I can just review the data. EVA reports, when you're near a planet, actually tell you where you're flying. That's EVA high, and EVA from moon's highlands. So that's a biome on the moon, is the highlands. I'm not going to collect multiple biomes of the moon because it's a lot easier to get into orbit to do that. And secondly, it's not that hard to collect biomes as you're about to land. So if you've decided to land in this little crater here, every crater on the moon has a name, the big ones at least. So I'm about to land in this big crater. I can do a quick EVA report on the way down to collect that. So I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm going to go ahead and time warp. And we're going to fly by the moon. And here we are, leaving the moon's orbit, and you'll see we'll sync up with this orbit, and we're now in this orbit around Kerbin. Our nav ball changes, our orbit changes, and the moon is now back to being its own little thing, where it's just flying around, minding its own business. But it's thrown us into this weird orbit. What we're going to do to slow ourselves down is we're going to select the apoapsis, add a maneuver, and just as before, in the reverse, we added energy at the periapsis, we're going to take away energy from the apoapsis. So we're going to go ahead and burn retrograde, and you'll see as our periapsis falls, oh, we actually interact with the moon one more time on the way back down, or on the way back up. Here it is. Let me show you. Here it is. We fall down, we come back up, and we interact with the moon, which changes our orbit. So you can do, like, by burning less fuel, look at that, you see that? By burning less fuel, you can throw ourselves into different types of orbits that get us closer to the planet. And then we burn again retrograde. But that's quite alright. We have plenty of fuel to pull this off. So I'm going to burn retrograde until the general rule of thumb is pretty much the same altitude that flying by the moon. You want to aim for about 15,000 meters. Now, the reason we're doing this is because, as I told you before, we're going to be falling very quickly, because right now we're at our apoapsis. It's going to be at the slowest point. So when we're decreasing, we're removing energy from the I'm going to go ahead and warp to next minute. When we're removing energy from the slowest point, we're going to be going from slow to slower. But since this is the highest point in our orbit, after we start to decrease our speed, we're going to start going a lot faster. So here it is, hitting my max thrust. Oh, it's going to be really slow because I forgot to thrust limiter. There we go. Okay, so here we are. We're decreasing our speed, and we're going from slow to slower. But that's pulling our periapsis closer to the surface. Now here it is. I'm stopping it prematurely, and I'm nudging my way down to about 15,000 meters. There it is. So when we're slowest here, it means we're going to be going really fast over here. And if we don't, like if we make our flight path so that it is hitting the surface, like if we slow down anymore, we're going to intercept with the surface. We might actually slam into the surface of the planet at super speeds. We don't want that. If we're going too fast past the planet, at least we'll go past it. We'll fly through the atmosphere will slow us down, and we'll go past it. And on the second loop around, we might be able to slow ourselves down enough to actually land. But if you're going so fast and you slam into the surface, you're gonna have a really hard time surviving that. So always, as a rule of thumb, don't try to aim for the surface unless you're in low Kerbin orbit. Don't try to aim for the surface. What I do when I have extra fuel, because I've got tons of fuel, what I do is I wait till I'm about 200,000 meters, right below the space high mark. So technically space near. I play with the time warp, and then I get to here, and there it is. I stop, and I'm going to point myself in retrograde. And I'm going to show you what happens. I'll turn on stability assist, and I'm going to show you what happens when you burn retrograde. It's going to slow down your maximum height, which is great. But it also reduces our periapsis. We don't want that to hit the surface. So to raise it above, I'm pointing towards the sky. That's going to raise my periapsis. I'm pointing it towards that little blue marker. I don't know if you can see it that well. But then when I get back to that point where I'm 15,000, I go back and point it towards the retrograde. And then it's going to start going down again. And then I just do this little balancing exercise between the retrograde and the sky. And I'm trying to balance so that this always stays at 15,000 meters. In this way, I'm removing all this energy from my craft. I'm slowing down, mostly. I'm also keeping myself afloat so I don't hit the surface. And this makes for a much safer re-entry, because when you're re-entering the atmosphere, the slower you are, the less heat you'll produce, and the less chance it is that you'll blow up your craft. So that's what we want. So now here it is. I've brought it down too high, so I gotta point up to the sky a little bit. And there it is. So I'm balancing between 15,000 meters and trying to balance somewhere as close to 15,000 as possible. So I'm just wobbling back and forth. And you can see here, I'm starting to run out of fuel. Come on. I'm starting to point it more and more towards the sky, because there it is. And I'm going to go ahead and stop for now. Still got a little bit of fuel. I'll go ahead and, I guess, add a little bit. No, point more higher. Higher to the sky, higher to the sky. Feel that? More retrograde, more sky, and eventually near the end you'll hit, there it is. Now I'm actually at the apoapsis. You can see that now. I've hit the highest orbit. At this point, I'm safe to re-enter. I've hit orbit around Kerbin, and it's below the high orbit. So I'm in low Kerbin orbit with periapsis going down. The rest of my fuel I can actually point to retrograde and just, burn the rest away. And I'll be fine. I don't need to worry about the periapsis being above the surface. And now I've got a nice, safe descent. That's very, very doable. Kill the engine, decouple that, and now we can just time warp, and let's work our way down. Eventually we're going to hit the atmosphere, but we'll see when we get there. It's going to be on the dark side of the planet, so it's going to be a little tricky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to point myself retrograde, and then stability assist, because you can tell here when you point retrograde and you're in the atmosphere, it's gonna jiggle. Look at all that, and that jiggle is draining our battery. We don't want that, so I'm gonna turn on stability assist, just the stability assist part. It drains very little energy. It only drains when you tell it to adjust. And I'm gonna time warp here, but since I'm in the atmosphere, I can only do 4 times time warp. And I'm just doing it to pass the time. You can't really see, but that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for reentry. Once reentry happens, I'm now manually just adjusting it so that I'm pointing the rocket in retrograde, because I don't want to burn up in the atmosphere, and I want my heat shield to be taking all of the energy out of my orbit. That's the goal. That's what I want. Now I'm still gaining speed. That's because the atmosphere hasn't compressed enough to slow me down, and at this point, here it is. Now I'm finally actually slowing down. So up until this point, I'm actually gaining speed as I'm falling towards the planet. Here it is, surface mode has been initiated, and now I'm actually flying in the atmosphere proper, and it's slowing me down. It's very important that I point myself towards the retrograde, so that my heat shield can be the one taking the energy, not anything else. I don't want my equipment, I don't want my crew pod, I don't want my stuff, or my science, I want to keep all that. I want to point that and try to save myself. Eventually, we might run out of electricity. For now, I'm just going to play it safe and do the waiting game. Again, constantly balancing, making sure that the retrograde is I'm pointing directly at the retrograde, it's siphoning away more and more of my energy. That's good, that's good. I'm staying afloat. I'm not flipping over, I'm not turning around. Eventually, the forces, the G's, when they get high enough, they're going to make you want to tip over. You keep trying. Always try to point retrograde. That's what you want until you run out of juice, essentially. But that's going to be quite alright. We've slowed down. We've made it past the thickest part of the atmosphere. We're slowed down. We're now Mach 2. And we're safe. There it is. We're totally safe. Right-click on a parachute to see when it is safe to deploy it. And just wait for your speed to go down. Again, still keep pointing retrograde. Eventually, you're going to get this risky, and then it's safe. And you can deploy your chutes and switch off your SAS. Now the parachutes will take care of orienting your craft the right way. I'm going to go ahead and log temperature. Aha! Flying over the waters. I never actually collected that. I collected it before on other equipment, but not on my thermometer, so that's good. But on the other hand, we do have crew report from the water and all that. That was one of the very first videos we did, so we have all that science. I just didn't have temperature, because it looks like we're over the waters. I'm going to time warp now and just land, splash down. There's no extra science to collect, so this is it. Just try to warp down to the surface. Parachutes have opened a little early. Now, time warp, time warp, time warp. Come on. These parachutes are very effective. I'm barely moving. 4 meters per second. I mean, it's quick, but it's not super quick. And anyways, now we play the waiting game. Safe re-entry, safe flyby. This was a pretty successful mission. I feel like this rocket is, with all the extra fuel we had, we'll totally be able to make it to Minmus. So in the next episode, we'll do a Minmus flyby, and we'll collect all that extra science, and we'll go one big major push to unlock new parts, because this rocket is totally good enough to do a Minmus flyby. And yeah, we'll totally do that in the next video. Actually, really looking forward to doing that. Okay, so we're almost hitting the surface now, 100 meters above. I'm going to go ahead and turn off time warp. You generally don't want to hit the surface with time warp on. The physics is a little interesting. It could break your craft, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants that ever. So, there we go. Gentle splash. We cover our vessel. And let's see what kind of science we got. 307. Great success. Great stuff. Excellent. So we collected a whole bunch of science from a moon flyby. And in the next episode, we're going to do a Minmus flyby. So we'll pretty much have another huge chunk of, 300 science points. So yeah, really looking forward to that. This has been Nerdy Spaceman. Stay safe and fly far.